I've heard of many tragic cases of walking, talking, normal children who wound up with profound mental disorders after vaccines. I'm not arguing vaccines are a bad idea. I think they're a good thing. But I think the parents should have some input. The state doesn't own your children. Parents own the children, and it is an issue of freedom.
Well, as you just heard, the measles outbreak is getting political, with politicians from the likes of President Obama to Senator Rand Paul, who you just heard weighing in on whether children should be required to get vaccinated.
The issue ignites a firestorm. Rand Paul went so far as to accuse the media of biased reporting.
Part of the problem is that you end up having interviews like this where the interview is so slanted and full of distortions that you don't get useful information. I think this is what's bad about TV sometimes. So frankly, I think if we do this again, you need to try to start out with a little more objectivity going into the interview.
So, should politicians and presidential hopefuls leave the issue to the medical community? We're back for Hour 3 with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, and joining us now at the anchor desk, we got someone who's a little bit of politician and a whole lot of a pediatric neurosurgeon. He's also author of the book One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future. Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Ben, welcome back to Newsmax TV.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
Let's get it straight from you. What should we be doing about immunizations and vaccination?
Well, we need to understand that a tremendous amount of progress has been made with vaccinations in terms of eliminating diseases which used to be devastating in our society. And we certainly don't want to go backwards. So we're dealing with a public safety issue here. There is no question that immunizations have been effective in eliminating things like smallpox, which were devastating and lethal diseases. So in terms of parental rights, yes, I am very much in favor of parental rights for certain types of things. But what we have to recognize is I'm in favor of you and I having freedom to drive a car. But do we have a right to drive without seatbelts on? Do we have a right to drive while we're texting? You know, studies have demonstrated that those are very dangerous things to do. So it becomes a public safety issue. So you have to be able to separate out our rights versus the rights of the society in which we live, because we're all in this thing together. So we have to be cognizant of other people around us.
Now, we've heard some debate earlier in the show on America's Forum where some people believe that there should be a balance of what the government mandates. Do you agree with that? In other words, should there be certain immunizations that the government mandates but others not so much? And should that be an issue when it comes to the federal government or the state government?
Well, I think it can be looked at and examined. We certainly have to have a mechanism whereby we can examine the complaints or objections that people have. We shouldn't just summarily dismiss them out of hand because they may have some legitimate things and reasons. But we always must bear in mind the safety of the population. That is key. And that's one of the responsibilities that government has. I'm a small government person, believe me, and I hate government intrusion into everything. But we have to be able to separate out those things that are important and those things that are just intruding upon our basic privacy.
But some would say that vaccinations are being pushed because pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money by pushing the government to force others to do that. What would be your response to that?
I would say vaccinations are pushed because they have been very successful in eliminating major public health hazards.
Politically, one of your potential opponents for the Republican nomination, Dr. and Senator Rand Paul, has been getting some heat from his comments. And surprisingly, not so surprisingly, another former governor who's also a physician, Howard Dean, weighed in from the Democrat side. Listen.
I actually believe this disqualifies Rand Paul from becoming president of the United States. If you're a physician and you say what he just said, then you are clearly willing to override any set of facts that you ought to know. It's one thing for Christie to blunder his way through this and try to pander. For Rand Paul to deny his entire education as a physician, I assume he went to a good medical school and knows something about medicine, that is truly appalling. And a guy like that should never be let near the White House.
30 seconds. Does Dr. Dean have a point?
No. He's just piling on. I don't think that's what Rand Paul was saying at all. You know, he was talking about the ability of people to weigh in on things that are important to them and not be overruled by the government. And I think if you really sat down and listened to what he was saying, he wasn't saying what they're claiming he's saying.
More proof positive that it's not politics as usual with Dr. Ben Carson. More with a good doctor when we come back.
I think that for us to be successful in fighting this scourge, it's very important for us to align ourselves with the 99.9% of Muslims who are looking for the same thing we're looking for: order, peace, prosperity. And so, you know, I don't quibble with labels.
President Obama on CNN there insistent that labels are really unnecessary when it comes to the fight against terror. Alongside Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, continuing our conversation with Dr. Ben Carson, who joins us here on the anchor desk. Dr. Carson, in your opinion, is the president correct about labels and the Islamic world?
No. If I'm not mistaken, not too many weeks ago, he said that ISIS is not Islamic. Wonder what that first I stands for. You know, he is the epitome of political correctness. And I have argued for a long time that political correctness is destroying our nation because it is interfering with our ability to think logically and to have the adequate discussion so that we can make progress. And I hope and pray that maybe at some point the president will actually realize that and stop playing these games and deal with the issue, because, you know, this is a serious problem. And they have a sworn desire to eliminate us and our way of life. Now, you can make two decisions there. You can say, let's wait for them to do that, or let's take definitive action to make sure that doesn't happen.
Dr. Carson, if you are commander-in-chief, what would you be doing to battle ISIS or any of these terrorist groups?
Well, I would, first of all, I would make it clear that we are going after them and we are going to eliminate them, and we would use every resource available to us, both covert and overt. And
what about boots on the ground? Boots
on the ground as well. Everything we have available to us, because you have to be able to claim your victory. You know, you knock out a few things with rockets, but you're not there to claim the victory. It goes right back to them.
Now, Doctor, as you know, everything is all-encompassing. Do you include in that nuclear arsenal, just conventional weapons? Do you draw the line anywhere?
Everything is on the table. Obviously, we're not going to be anxious to use nuclear weapons if we don't have to use nuclear weapons. But you must recognize that our duty is to protect the people of the United States of America and to be loyal to our allies. They are our allies for a reason. We need to also understand that if we want to form a coalition, we must lead. They're not going to form and then say, okay, come on and lead us. It doesn't work that way. We have to, you know, open our eyes, look at the way things have always worked, use that data to help us formulate the right kind of plan, not wishful thinking. Wishful thinking doesn't work in war.
What's your take on Iran? There's been talk that Al Jazeera has reported that they've seen satellite images showing a nuclear warhead on a launch pad in Iran, right outside of Tehran. And yet there's also been talk about this administration.
Well, a friendly amendment,
right.
A new long-range ICBM.
Right. Sorry, correction.
We're still concerned about the nuclear capability.
Well, of course, we should be concerned about it. When you had somebody like Ahmadinejad who said, you know, we want to obliterate Israel, of course we should be concerned about it. And now, as they're developing weapons of longer range, we should be concerned about it. And we should make it very clear to them that if any nuclear weapons are launched from Iran, Iran will be non-existent. That should be very clear to them.
Let me just, because of the gravity of what's being said here, I want to make sure that we all understand exactly what you're saying. If you were commander-in-chief
and they launch a nuclear missile, we will retaliate. Absolutely.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
No ifs, ands, and buts about it.
Going from that momentous decision almost seems to shrink in insignificance here, but I have to ask you one thing about the Republican field. Mitt Romney is now out of the race. Was that a wise decision on his part? We have about a minute left.
I'm sure he listened very carefully to his family and other people close to him before he made that decision. It doesn't affect me one way or the other. I want to have a lot of people in the field. I want to hear lots of opinions because it's critical that the Republicans and conservatives have the right person running. And we need to hear what everybody has to say about that.
So you're saying you're not so sure if you're the right person?
I may not be the right person, but that's why we have this process.
And you're taking a look at offering yourself still as a candidate, perhaps, in the days ahead.
We are laying the groundwork.
Fair enough. And one way to do that, of course, is writing a book. And to get your copy of Dr. Carson's New York Times #1 best-selling book, One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future, you can go to newsmax.com/Ben to end up with a copy of that, part of a free offer. More to come here on America's Forum.